And hello there. It's been a while. It's me, Dave LaMont, with a nooner on this November 4th, a Friday, and I'm just as surprised to be sitting here as you might be to be looking at me. It's been a couple of months, and part of the problem, or part of the reason, I shouldn't call it a problem, is that because of my work at the high school as a broadcasting teacher, I'm tied up Monday through Friday until about 12:45, and I don't have a free period where I could go and record the broadcast as I was doing some last year. If you remember the ones I did with the green wall behind me, that was done at school. I just don't have that opportunity. And another reason, honestly, is I haven't really had much to say. And I don't want to waste my time or your time. Those of you who are kind enough to watch this whenever it's available, I deeply appreciate that. I always do wonder if anybody gives a crap what I have to say, and a few of you actually do, maybe even more than I care what I have to say. But I'm very appreciative of that, and I don't want to waste my time or your time by just slapping something together once or twice a week that really has no significance behind it. And I'm not sure this will either today, but I just kind of felt like getting a few things off my mind, and this is the perfect platform in which to do so. I'll start briefly with Kyrie Irving and the fact that this was poorly handled from the beginning. Now, does he have a right to say these things? Yes, he does. People also have a right to say, hey, Kyrie, you're full of crap, and we don't like what you said. That's how this goes, you know. And he has a right then to defend himself. Now, to me, his comments are indefensible. And what he did was indefensible. And the fact that just now, days after all of this started, he decides to apologize after being suspended by the team and before a one-on-one meeting with the NBA commissioner. I don't get it. I don't think Kyrie Irving is stupid. He doesn't have a low IQ. He has opinions that are hard for many people like me to agree with, like the flat earth thing. But he does have that right to express them. But what he's doing here, it's just impossible to get behind. At least it is to me. And I think to most people, it's impossible. So I'm glad that finally, even if it's too little too late. Now, the issue you have to ask yourself, remember, because of his refusal to get vaccinated, he couldn't play. Whether we agree with the rule or not, it was the rule. So he screwed his team there by being unavailable half the time. And so that's just selfish. It's not, by the way, some Christ-like act of martyrdom. It's selfishness. You're welcome to disagree with the vaccine mandate that was in place at the time. That's your right. But when you screw others because of it, then I don't know. That to me seems incredibly selfish. I don't think it's really some great stand. Call me crazy, and many of you would. So there's that. So the problem now is that with social media, you can find out pretty quickly whether you like someone or don't like them. And all it takes is usually one or two, maybe, impressions to go, hey, that's my kind of person, or good God, I wouldn't, piss on them if they were on fire. And unfortunately, Kyrie Irving better not get on fire anytime soon, at least in certain parts of the country. Maybe others, they'll be happy to help him out. But I don't understand it. I don't understand why you would think this was okay. That's my problem. Call me nuts. The Miami Dolphins are finally fulfilling their fans with great moves, and you have to give it to them. They needed help for Tua. They got it for him in the offensive end, and then they tweaked it again by perhaps improving their running game. Tyreek Hill has been exactly what they needed. He's making Tua a better quarterback. Tua has made himself a better quarterback. And now you make a trade to help a defense that had been a bit wobbly, but you got a really good player and you immediately sign him to a long-term deal, smart all the way through. And your team, you have a soft spot in the schedule to rack up some wins. The Bears, might give them some resistance in Chicago this weekend. It looks like Justin Fields has turned a big corner and has improved as a quarterback, but I don't know if they have enough. And their defense is not like one of those classic Bears defenses. So I think the Dolphins will win the game. Can they beat Buffalo again when it matters? That's their move. Their targets are now Buffalo and Kansas City. It's no longer just New England and the Jets and winning the division, competing in the division or competing for a last playoff spot, of which there are too many playoff spots, but that's another story for another day. So you have to give that group an enormous amount of credit, because for the longest time, it seemed like any move they made was a bad one. They didn't hire the right person as a coach. They may have hired the right person as a coach here. They make a trade. It doesn't work. They get the wrong person. They misjudge Drew Brees. All of that stuff over the years has added to all the Dolphins fans that I know is, beating their head against the wall. Then you have all the problem with Stephen Ross at the beginning of the year. And in some ways, him not being around very much, it might be helping. You haven't heard much out of him lately. And that's how owners should be. This came up because of a post my buddy Joe Casale wrote about the Yankees, one of his obsessions, unfortunately, having a postseason press conference. And he thought the owner, Hal Steinbrenner, should be there. And my thought was, no. The best owners generally stay the hell out of the way. How many times do I have to mention Mickey Arison and the Miami Heat to you? Does Mickey Arison show up at the yearly press conference? No. Two people speak for this team publicly, and that's Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley, along with the players and regular interviews. But the message is a consistent message. It's delivered by people that have earned the trust of the fans. I would think they have by now. And Mickey Arison, who understands he's a public figure, but doesn't go running around reminding everybody he's a public figure like Jerry Jones and others. And then you have, horrifying turds like Dan Snyder owning the team that I grew up rooting for, which is, I watch them and I go, well, okay, they won great. But it's not like, all right, because Snyder has sucked the joy out of that franchise. And maybe he'll get rid of it. Maybe somebody will, never mind. Anyway. But going back to the Dolphins, they're now set up to make a legitimate run to go deep in the playoffs. I still think Buffalo's a little better, even though the Dolphins beat them. I still think Kansas City might be a tiny bit better. But you're now in a position, and you were set up for future successes. Even though they surrendered some draft choices, they can always get some of those back. And if you use your draft capital wisely, which they have done, then what the hell? These players are going to be better than draft picks. It's smart football, it really is. And I must say that they deserve all the credit in the world. Do you remember the days, and I certainly do, when a Miami-Florida State football game was the number one topic of conversation, not just in Tallahassee, not just in South Florida, but all over the country? Like, this was the game. This was the number one game in the country for a long time, when you had two huge programs. I mean, in the 80s especially, you had almost an NFL roster full of players in these games between the two schools. They were exciting games. They were played at the highest level, and the most intense football games I ever saw, even if I wasn't at the game. Those games were beyond special. Not only did they mean something to everybody, fans and alums and the players and the coaches, et cetera, it meant something to all of college football. The loser of that game was usually out of the championship race, the national championship race. Talking about back in the days when, more schools were independent. Miami was independent. Over time, we know what's happened. And I've got to be honest, Florida State's kind of limping in. Miami is absolutely limping in. And it's like a saving face game now. If Miami scores the upset, then it's a big face saver for the team, even though I think they're going in the right direction, albeit very slowly. They just picked up a huge recruit a week ago, number 2 rated player, a cornerback. And while defensive backs may not excite people, this guy should. Florida State seems to be crawling back toward respectability, and they were patient with Mike Norvell, as they should have been, because this idea of just, wiping guys out after a year or two of bad football like Auburn did with Brian Harsin, are you giving that guy any time? I would think unless the coach that goes 0-22, that you give that guy an opportunity to work through his first recruiting class. Now, I realize things are changing all the time. You had an Oklahoma State player who just quit the season to get ready for the NFL. Okay, that's where we are. We now have players who are being openly paid and legally paid by legally, I mean under the bylaws, because of these name, image, likeness deals. So all that crap's above board now. So we don't have to worry about that anymore, and cheating and all. Okay, it's up front. Where a lot of the stuff has been bubbling below the surface. Now the surface is clean. You can do this. But it still hasn't helped yet. Miami, we know, is going to take a while. And some of the players who have made an impact on this season, particularly receiver Colby Young, is a Mario Cristobal guy who was kind of brought in late, was young, and now he turns out to be your number one weapon offensively. But there's no buzz there. There's no excitement. You feel like if Miami wins, okay, they go to 5-4, they're above 500, likely to sneak into a bowl game. They could just as easily lose every game from here on in. Florida State, if they win, well, obviously the bragging rights. Of course, they won last year in a game they probably shouldn't have won, but they did. It was the absolute. In fact, losing that game in the manner which Miami did set the whole thing in motion to bring Cristobal in. If Miami holds off on fourth down and wins that game, they finish strongly, and there's really no logical reason to fire Diaz. There isn't. So you could be grateful they blew that game if you'd like. But if you're a Miami fan, that is. Pardon me. But there's just no. I mean, I remember either going to those games, and I was going as a member of the press, but still, under my breath rooting for Miami because I'm an alum, if you didn't know. And just walking out of there, or even watching games on TV with just a headache. It was so intense. I remember, I think it was Wide Right 2. It was the one that was played in Tallahassee because I had to watch it on TV. I didn't go. And I just remember taking like 2 or 3 hours to come down from that game. That's how intense those games were and how much it mattered. And that's not happening right now. It may one day get there. It's kind of like in the NFL when the Raiders don't matter and some of these rivalries you used to have, like Washington and Dallas, don't matter because one of or both of the teams is terrible. In this case, Dallas appears to be pretty good now, but Washington is very, very average. The true rivalries, Chiefs and Raiders, it goes back to the days of the AFL. Well, the Raiders are terrible, but the NFL kind of needs them to be good because of their old image. But they're not. They're a major disappointment. You need the Packers to be good. You need the Bears and Packers to have that rivalry really matter outside of the two fan bases. Steelers and Browns used to matter. And now neither team is really worth a hoot. We're on the hunt for new rivalries, but they're hard to find. Dolphins, Jets hasn't mattered much, except, again, to the fan bases. You want these rivalries to matter in the big picture. And right now, Miami, Florida State, in the big picture, does not matter. People I know who are Florida State fans will be happy if Miami wins and so forth, and reverse the field on that. But the isn't there. And finally, I need to speak to my fellow old people. Dear fellow old people, as I have talked about on this little show before, nostalgia is a powerful drug. And it kind of amuses me to lecture about nostalgia because I may have mentioned this before. I'm literally a guy who looks at early 70s and late 60s NFL films shows before I go to bed at night. That is true. I'll find the old This Week in Pro Footballs with Pat Summerall and Tom Brookshire, or the NFL Game of the Week with people like Chuck Thompson or Jack Whitaker or Ray Scott narrating them, Charlie Jones, old AFL stuff he did with Pat Summerall. I'll watch that. It takes me back. And I'm not against nostalgia, and I'm not against looking back when it comes to your favorite sports teams or your favorite sport. Not against it at all. But what bothers me, and this happened as a result of the World Series with the no hitter with the four pitchers, just that which is a very unique thing and very hard to do, is all the people, again, mainly older, who come out and complain. Well, in my day, the pitcher would stay for the whole game. Well, yeah, I know. They don't do that anymore. Complete games are rare. You don't have to like it, but you have to accept it. It's like a bad medical diagnosis. You don't have to like it, but you have to accept it and you have to deal with it. Maybe that's a bad analogy because a baseball game is far from a medical diagnosis, but it's still the same principle. And do I wish things used to be? Yeah. I wish we weren't going to have a 12-team playoff in college football. You talk about watered down the product. Ugh. But it's going to happen because the world insisted on it, so you'll get it. And I'll have to live with it. There was a time when the national champion was voted on before the bowl games. Try that one out for size. Imagine the outrage if they did that now. But this idea that everything was better in the past isn't necessarily the case. Do I wish the pitchers? Yeah, sure. But the game, everything has changed primarily because of money, because the value of franchises and the value of the players it reached a level that nobody ever imagined in the 60s or 70s even. Even when Joe Namath got that first big paycheck and he was the first guy to get paid, although a lot of his contract did not go to him. It went to family members and different, it was spent in many different ways. But he was the first guy to get paid. And that started, oh my God, sport will never survive. Well, guess what? Sports has survived. It has thrived. There are franchises that are worth billions of dollars. So if you employ analytics people, that's where the game is. Do I get a little tired of worrying about how fast a home run leaves the ball? Yeah, that doesn't do anything for me. I can see it for myself. Wow, he hit the hell out of that ball, didn't he? Yeah, I'm good with that. But that's how it is. Broadcasts are clogged with this kind of stuff. Some of it is overkill, without question. But that's how the game is fed to the broadcasters when they speak with the analytics people, they speak with managers, they speak with. I mean, there are football coaches who go by a notebook, that they will make every decision by this analytics notebook. Oh, the book says go for it on 4th of 11 from our own 20. Okay, we're going for it. That's a slight exaggeration, but only a slight one. That's where we are. The idea that people are that, again, old people primarily are offended by players who celebrate for cameras and do dances and do things. That's where the game is. That's where the athletes have taken it. The networks like it because it gives people something to talk about. And if it makes you mad that you're still talking about it, that's not going to change. That expression of putting the genie back in the bottle is absolutely true when it comes to sports. And I'm sorry the stadiums are nice now. I'm sorry that, players make good money now and have nice locker rooms and private planes to get from city to city. Sorry, but that's how it evolves. So, yeah, it would have been awesome to see a pitcher run straight through and throw a no-hitter. But who won the game? That's really what matters. And sometimes we lose sight of that in our love for bringing everything back to the way it used to be. We are nostalgic people. I am a nostalgic person. I think of past athletes and things and this guy and this. I'll give you an example. On Facebook a little while ago, in a group chat, a group I'm involved, did they put up a picture? Okay, if you could, any 3 Major League Baseball players in history, you could form an outfield. Okay, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Roberto Clemente. None of them playing today. You could just as easily put, more modern players. You could put Griffey in there. You could put Mike Trout. You could do anything. But I went with the past. We do love to live in the past. I do remember the days of Muhammad Ali very fondly. Remember Ali Frazier, Ali Foreman, all those things very fondly. I don't keep up with boxing. I have no idea who the heavyweight champion is. None. Don't even care, frankly. But the idea that everything was better in the past, you have to adapt. And I always use, for the last words to today, music. Now, you know me, I know I love music. And I have an era of music I really like. And that's, although I think I have a variety of tastes from anywhere from big band jazz to like the Sinatra swing stuff, which I really like, to some uh, hip hop music, particularly the earlier stuff that came out in the 90s, living in the past. Um, some singer songwriters, but generally blues artists, rock artists, stuff like that. So to me, starting with the mid 60s and the emergence of the Beatles and the Stones and the Who and all those bands, the British Invasion, and then the 70s, the classic rock, what we now know as the classic rock era, even through the grunge era of the 90s, which I appreciated only 20 years later, instead of when it was happening. But we were all told that we were going to hell when Elvis showed up. And the young artists that followed him. But it was Elvis who blew everything up. And, parents and oh God, this is it. And this has been going on now forever. It seems like all my life. And as we evolve, supposedly as human beings, and we cling to our Beatles and our Stones and our Who and all that, which is fine, you can't just say today's music is garbage. You cannot like it, but you sound like your parents. Now, I have the advantage of being around teenagers at high school and listening to what their musical tastes are, which ain't mine, although they do know of some of the bands. You want to be humbled fast. Try talking about a movie you like that came out in 1980. See how fast that goes. It's a short conversation. So Taylor Swift, who's dominating the charts as no other artist ever has, is a reflection of what's popular now, of course, generally with younger people. They drive the bus when it comes to this kind of thing. And that's you know what used to drive the bus? We did. We drove the bus. We made all these bands popular by buying their records. We made Bruce Springsteen popular. We made Journey popular, Santana. We made Billy Joel popular, Elton John. We did all of that by buying their music, spending our money on their concerts. And then, as MTV came along, we watched their videos and so forth and just keep naming the bands. I could do it all day. Well, the same thing's happening now. You don't have to like it, but you have to accept it. And there is a difference. In other words, you have to go, well, that's how it is. Taylor Swift is popular. Lizzo is popular. Dua Lipa, popular. And so on and so on and so on. The country artists, maybe you don't like country music. I'm not a huge country music fan, but if you don't understand or believe that these people are popular. My favorite thing that comes up to show how this generation that I live in is so not divided, because that sounds like politics, and I'm not talking about that here. So on an island, that's better. Is either when somebody shows up on Saturday Night Live that they've never heard of before, like Jack Harlow, who I'm not that familiar with either. Or I remember somebody posting when The Weeknd was named as the Super Bowl halftime show. By the way, it's a good show. And I had heard some of his songs, so I knew who he was. But people, who is this guy? First off, we have these things in our pockets and right in front of you called computers. And you could look that crap up yourself. But if you need to be lectured and made look bad, I'll be happy to help. And I remember writing to somebody, well, The Weeknd has sold about 70 million records, or whatever the number is, and had the following number one hits. Oh, I didn't know that. No, well, you chose not to know that. And that's okay. You live your life the way you want to live your life, but you have to accept what's going on out there. You have to look at it and go, okay. I'm not talking about accepting Kyrie Irving. Don't do that. But I'm talking about accepting how the culture is changing. And that's not easy for me all the time either. I listen to some of the music that I don't like very much. And like, geez, I think my music was better. The same person who's listening to his or her music is going to go, are you nuts? And we're off and running. I would just say, don't get crusty about it. And this is coming from me, Captain Krusty. Crustier than Krusty the Clown, Krusty. There are wonderful things in the good old days that we should hang on to, that I still hang on to. TV shows, all this stuff. How about instead of acceptance, open-mindedness? Would that work? Just like today's show. You have to like it. You have to accept it. Please vote whether or not you and I agree on things. I do firmly believe in voting. I'm actually early voting. I'm just about to wrap up my ballot, and I'm going to drop that off at an early polling place. I do urge you to vote, and particularly pay attention to the local stuff. It's quite possible, depending on where you live, that your local leaders will be more important than a U.S. senator or a governor. You want to get the people that you think will best represent you in your daily life. A state senator or a U.S. senator or a governor doesn't always affect your daily life, but somebody who, changes things in your town for the better or for the worse does affect your daily life. So just keep that in mind when you head to the ballot either Tuesday or maybe do what I'm going to do and find an early voting place to drop off my ballot. Thank you. Delighted to be back. Hope we get to do it again soon.